Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast with Ron and Kristin, where leadership meets entertainment. This podcast features stories with names and certain aspects that have been changed to keep submissions private. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast, where leadership meets entertainment and where we expose the truths that most people shy away from, whether it's business, politics, or today, brain health. I'm Kristin, and I'm joined by my co-host, Ron Ward. How's it going, Ron?
I'm doing well, Kristin. Excited to travel to the great state of Ohio for a speaking engagement. And
you been there before, Ron?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Do you know that the Alpha generation, they say that's so Ohio, and Ohio is the new word for weird?
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Not sure where that came from, but I thought I'd let you in on that. Before
Kristin,
you go there.
I grew up in Charleston, West Virginia, so I was only 2.5 hours from Columbus, Ohio. And then, of course, I went up to Sandusky for, a vacation. That's the big theme park up there. So, I've spent a lot of time in Ohio. And at one point, I had 4 employees from Ohio.
Okay. So you're quite familiar, it sounds like. Well, enjoy that trip.
Yeah, I sure hope so.
It's weird.
I sure hope so. I think this episode is one of the most important episodes that we've done, and it's personal. It's not about some things we usually talk about, profit margins, corporate ladders, or public image. It's about the thing that makes everything else possible: our minds, our memories, and our brains.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's be honest, this one hits home for probably everybody listening. We all know someone who's battled dementia or Alzheimer's, a mother, grandfather. For me, I literally have a grandmother who is on the very end of battling it for the past 2 years. And my husband's grandmother is now battling it. So I don't know a person that hasn't been touched by this. So maybe you've watched somebody that you love slowly lose pieces of themselves, who they were, who they knew, or even the names of their own children.
Alzheimer's is the most feared disease in the United States, more than cancer, more than heart attacks.
Wow.
A 2024 survey by the Alzheimer's Association found that 66% of America fear memory loss more than death. That's a staggering statement. And full disclosure here, I told Kristin offline that it's something that I catch myself fearing, that I'd rather go than to put my family through that. Or you don't even know internally how you feel about being disoriented, because some people get really frustrated and angry, and it's just terrible. It's terrible.
Yeah, absolutely. I know my mom says the same thing, especially after watching her mom battle this for some time. And this is interesting. So as of 2025, over 7.2 million Americans aged 65 and older are living with Alzheimer's. That's 1 in 9. And by 2050, they are projecting nearly 13 million.
The optimistic side of me wants to say by 2050, we will find breakthroughs in,
right.
Neurological studies and things like that. But
well, they are right now, which is great.
I know that AI, and some of this we are really delving into with coaching about how AI is affecting the knowledge that some stereotypes that we had, some misinformation that we had about the human brain. So I'm hopeful on that.
Yeah.
Anyway, behind every diagnosis is a caregiver. In 2024, over 19 million unpaid hours of care were provided in the U.S., more than 400 billion. And Kristin, I talked to someone not long ago who was dynamic. They were always making things happen. And I hadn't heard from them in a while, and I reached out. And basically, they said, my life isn't consumed by taking care of both my parents. Oh. And one was dementia, and the other was general health problems. And they were working toward getting assisted living, but your whole life can change when you're caring for someone.
Yeah, that is heavy for sure.
Yeah.
What most people miss also is that brain decline doesn't start at 65. It starts decades earlier, and it's often in your prime leadership years.
Yeah, and that's why it isn't a medical episode. It's a leadership aspect. And I'll say this for the men listening. Most of us don't want to admit when we're slipping until we're already in it.
Right, right. Absolutely. And women, we are twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's, not just because we live longer, but because of how we process stress. We carry emotional burdens and experience hormonal shifts like men do not. So that's something to pay attention to as well.
Yeah, so whether you're a CEO, a stay-at-home parent, a caregiver, whatever it is, this episode is for you because your habits are either building brain resilience or slowly eroding it. And Kristin, on day one, when I get a new coaching client, I explain to them that our coaching is literally brain fitness, whereas therapy or mental, counseling is mental
Yeah.
health.
Right.
So I explained the difference. We're taking someone that's pretty healthy mentally and we're making them more fit, giving them tools to use. It's not
Yes.
mental health counseling.
Right, right. Thank you for the clarification on that. Thought you had a PhD in there, Ron. I'm just messing with you. Okay, so we're going deep into stress, hormones, food, sleep, testing, and daily routines that actually protect your mind. So let's dive into this, Ron.
Let's do. Why this matters to leaders of both sexes. Let's kick this off by making it clear, and we've already said this isn't a women's health episode. This is for both genders. This is a leadership health episode. Your brain is your number one leadership tool, not your title, not your salary, not your net worth. If your cognitive function starts to slip, so does your ability to lead well.
Yeah, sure does. And I know you did a little research and you found some interesting information from the Harvard Business Review.
A recent Harvard Business Review study showed that executives under chronic stress had 14% lower working memory performance compared to their peers. That means you could be showing up at meetings and leaving half of your sharpness at the door. Leaders are the decision makers. If stress is clouding their decisions, you're leading from a deficit. And I'm telling you right now, that had my name written all over it. I remember times coming in when I hadn't slept well and I just wasn't sharp. And that's the prefrontal cortex of the brain. All the other transmitters are coming in, but that's where you process it. And I've said this before, Kristin, but I can work on a crossword puzzle, cannot think of an answer, get a night's sleep, wake up, and it comes to me like that.
Oh, wow. Do you have it on your nightstand?
I do everything. I've got a thing that dims my my phone light. I do everything on my phone now. I'm totally electronic. I don't want to brag, but I am.
Oh, yeah, you're fancy. Okay, so, and I couldn't agree more with what you're saying. So for women, the load is layered differently. It's not just corporate stress, it's emotional stress. So if women are ever wondering like why something bothers you a lot more than it bothers your husband or your boyfriend, it's literally it has to do with the way we're wired. So something that will eat at me for days and days, maybe I'm worried about my kids. My husband has already moved on. He's okay. So it's the caretaking aspect of it and managing the unspoken expectations of really being the glue at home and at work. And neuroscience confirms this. Women have more active default mode networks, which means our brains are constantly scanning and analyzing emotional input, even when we're resting. And that makes us empathetic leaders, right? But it also puts us at a higher risk of emotional exhaustion. And I've been there. I feel like I'm always on the brink of that.
That's where I always say, I think I'm in touch with my feminine side. I hit most of those categories. My brain races a lot of times. But anyway, Kristin, talk to us about why women get dementia more.
I know. And it's really like the elephant in the room. So 2/3 of all Alzheimer's cases are women. Do you ever hear people say old timers? That drives me nuts.
Yes, I grew up saying that, but go ahead.
Did you? Wait, hold on.
No, not old timers. We always, when I was younger, I called it all-timers, and that's what most people call it.
That's what it drives me nuts. But anyways, so I'll move on from that, Ron. Just take a breath. Okay. So we now know hormonal shifts, especially during menopause, play a critical role in cognitive decline and even perimenopause, right? So pre-menopause. Estrogen is a neuroprotective hormone. So it regulates glucose metabolism in the brain, and it supports health and reduces inflammation. When estrogen drops, so does that protection. So some researchers even refer to Alzheimer's as type 3 diabetes. And I listen to health podcasts all the time, so I've heard this, and I think it's really important that we're diving into it. Type 3 diabetes.
Yeah,
Look it
Kristin
up.
is a step ahead on health because I've never heard that before.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it's not just biology, it's invisible stress. I call those micro stressors, and I do some illustrations in my training to show how micro stressors. I have someone punch me with a boxing glove, and I hold up my hand and I say, "Do you think this hurts?" And they're hitting my hand over and over, and everybody says no. I said, "What if we did it all night and you guys come back tomorrow?" I said, "Eventually my hand's going to bruise." And that's what micro stressors, they ultimately result in cortisol. And then that, of course, goes to type 2 diabetes and heart issues and all the other things. But the problem is, the reason I like to stress micro stressors is we don't process it, like traffic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in traffic. I'm just frustrated, but I don't even realize that I'm starting to get these symptoms like fatigue, headaches, and crying spells. I don't cry a lot, Kristin, but I assume here, no, we're still talking about women here. And then cortisol overload shrinks the hippocampus, which is your memories, and it plays a part in that decision
insane.
part. So, yeah, it's really devastating.
It literally shrinks it. I mean, that's the memory hub. It's really devastating if you think about it. And, add in caregiving, skipped meals. Women skip meals all the time, right? It's like we're making sure our kids are fed and that everything that we need to do is in order. Men do this too, not as often, but poor sleep. There are studies out there showing that women need between 8 and 10 hours sleep on average. Men need less. So it's really interesting. I'm not saying men go sleep 5 hours and call it a day, but women actually need more sleep. And all of this is coming out now. So I'm like, I feel vindicated. But it's a recipe for burnout if you're not eating your meals, taking care of yourself, getting adequate sleep. And, on top of that, women are managing everybody's emotions. Often this is done silently, and that wears us down cognitively. And we normalize it. We wear exhaustion like a badge of honor, like it proves that we're holding it all together. We've heard people, we talk about, the bragging, they're bragging about the busy bragging, but it's not sustainable. And eventually something gives. And for a lot of women, that give shows up as brain fog or mood swings, memory lapses, and eventually a real issue with cognitive decline, like we're talking about here.
Yeah, and this is a call out for leaders, especially women leaders, not to push this aside. Your cognitive health is not a luxury. It's the foundation for your influences, your clarity, your presence. This isn't about fear. It's about being proactive. Taking your brain seriously is one of the strongest moves you can make, not just for your career, but for your family, your future, and your longevity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. And, you love talking about this. I'm really excited for this next segment because it just sheds an extra light on what we're doing here. And that's how chronic stress rewires the brain.
Yeah, it does. And I talked about micro stressors, which, then produce cortisol. And the problem is it sneaks up on us. And it definitely, as we've said, shrinks the hippocampus, weakens memory, focus, and mood regulation. And that crossword puzzle that I talked about is a prime example of how you don't realize that there's a little bit of cognitive decline until you have to make those finite decisions, or you're doing something in math, you're calculating, you're trying to figure something out. And if you start seeing that, you may be experiencing this type of cognitive decline and you need to take action.
Yeah, you have to be on top of it for sure. And, let's get real. You start forgetting things, you're snapping at your kids, relying on caffeine to power you through the day, but you chalk it up to just being busy. And no, this is your brain under pressure. And I know I've experienced things where I am like, oh my gosh, how did I forget that? Like you're on your way to the dryer to get, to fold the laundry, and you get interrupted by something, and you're next thing you know, you're in the fridge making your kid a sandwich, and then you're like, what was I doing? And sometimes to me, I'm like, I feel like I'm losing my mind, but it's that pressure cooker that I'm experiencing. And I do think it's important that we not only recognize it, but do something to change the trajectory.
Yeah, and don't think sales and marketing haven't taken advantage of this. Think about the
Yeah.
growth of Starbucks and coffee shops. There's certain people that have to have a coffee at, 3 p.m. to get through the rest of the day. And then there's a big, big change, and that is Monster type drinks.
Oh,
They
yeah.
have swept the market, the highest sales. As a matter of fact, I know someone who's developing one. And if you know that there is this lack of sleep, stress, all these other things, you capitalize just the way armies used to do by giving out meth or giving out different drugs. You're going to capitalize on that. And people are getting taken advantage of or getting addicted to needing that bump to get them through the day. So most people don't act on this until they just crash. But brain protection is about prevention, not damage control. If you're listening to me and you have to have that energy drink to get through the day, you may want to reevaluate that. I'll be honest, Kristin, I found one that I really liked. And it's only because I went to the grand opening of 7-Eleven. I think you were here when they were about to open it. So I go to this grand opening, and me being a miser, they're like, we have all these energy drinks. Do you want it? Because I got there at the end of the day.
Yeah.
They go, do you want these? I'm like, heck yeah. So they load the bag. Well, I taste.
Oh, they were giving them out for free?
Yeah, but I was like the last person.
Oh.
And the bank, the people that love you, the 7-Eleven's right beside the bank. They pointed. She goes, you got to go over there. It's the grand opening. So I'm like, okay,
hilarious.
It's a grand opening. I'll go get a free Slurpee, whatever. So I'm kidding. I don't drink Slurpees.
I was wondering if you got a free Slurpee. Okay.
No,
okay. So
I don't,
you didn't.
I don't like those.
Man, back in the day, so good.
So I leave there with this energy drink, and I tasted of it, and oh my God. And it says caffeine free. So I love
Ron
this
just
thing.
said that with his eyes closed. That's how much he liked
I
it.
did, if you're listening. I'm going to go have one now. So all of a sudden, I started not falling asleep after midnight. And I can't figure this out. I increased my workout a little bit. And I mean, it got to be, and all of a sudden, I started looking up the ingredients. I looked the ingredients up once. I looked it up again, and it has a substitute. Kristin would know all about this. But
you're like, say it ain't so.
It totally boosts your adrenaline. Now, I'm going to give a tip to all of you out there. So I'm not a health nut. I'm healthy. So what I did, because I'm too cheap to throw them away, I had a case. Because, by the way, after I liked them so much, I ordered a case. What I do, why am I admitting this on a podcast?
Keep going. Keep going.
I do ice. I have half water. Now, this is only early, not after 6 p.m., folks. Then I pour some of that drink in there, and then I put a little cap on that can. And I'll use it over about a 2 to 3 day period. It flavors my drink when I'm eating, and I love it. And I've gotten used to it. So it's more water than it is energy drink.
That's a healthy approach to it. No, I do something similar too, where it's like you have your drink. I get my one sparkling water that has some sugar in it, and I pour a cup full of the one that has zero sugar in it, and then just a little cap on the top, and then it gives you enough flavor to get through it.
So it's like an Arnold Palmer, Kristin.
Yeah. But like a 90-10,
Yeah.
versus a 50-50.
Please take over. Find something to say.
Oh, well, I think it's interesting. We talked about the hippocampus a little bit earlier, and, that's really the part of the brain that takes the biggest hit, and that's your memory center. So it helps convert short-term memories into long-term ones. And I think this is really interesting. My daughter, I know I've mentioned this in earlier episodes, but she had a lobectomy because she had a benign brain tumor that was causing epilepsy. They removed her right hippocampus and her right temporal lobe. And the amazing thing is it didn't negatively impact memory whatsoever, because when something's not working properly, the other side will start making up for it. But in this case, The hippocampus, that is your memory center. So you have to really be mindful of that, no pun intended, that that is what allows you to retrieve information. And these studies that we've been talking about, they're showing that people that have been exposed to long-term elevated cortisol levels, that stress hormone, have smaller hippocampuses altogether. And that's not metaphorical. That's visible on MRI scans. I know what extra evidence do we need that stress is incredibly toxic for us men and women. So what does that mean in real life? It means you're starting to walk into rooms and forgetting why you're there. I've done that before. You're searching for words mid-sentence. You're reading emails 3 times before your focus is shot. And you chalk it up to being busy or getting older. But this, again, is your brain under siege, and you need to listen to it.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. That doesn't just affect memory. Chronic stress also affects the prefrontal cortex. And I mentioned that. That is all of the hippocampus, the amygdala, both work together for memories. And all of that, these neurotransmitters are going to the front of the brain. And the decision-making process happens in that prefrontal cortex. And you just cannot regulate your emotions. That's why some people can burst out and cry or have impulse control. They want to stress eat, want to drink alcohol. There's a lot of things that happen when we are fatigued and the hippocampus, amygdala, and parts of the brain are fatigued. We begin to make poor decisions.
Right, right. And for those that don't know, you probably know this, Ron. I'm going to put you on the spot. At what age is your prefrontal cortex fully developed?
Men 25, women younger.
Is it really younger for women? I thought it was 25 across the board.
No, women's develop earlier. That's why
Interesting.
They joke about men making such poor decisions. Kristin, you didn't see this, but I did a post. I thought it was hilarious. I did it for a story, and I put very excited. My prefrontal cortex finally, or my frontal lobe finally developed. Yeah, I didn't really get any laughs.
Yeah,
but anyway.
I think it's great. Well, it's really interesting. So when you go to rent a car, most places don't allow you to rent them until you're 25. And I really feel like it has something to do with studies showing that that's when the prefrontal cortex is fully developed for men, I guess. But it's interesting. I don't think that just happens to be that number. So, let's get real. This is something that would happen in the workplace. You start snapping at your team. You can't stay present in meetings. You're reaching for caffeine in the morning, sugar in the afternoon. Like you said, maybe a second coffee in the afternoon. I had a routine once where I would do a morning coffee, and I had a Starbucks right next to me at the bank. And then I'd go there at 3 and get my afternoon coffee as well, right? So you're just wired, but then you do crash. It only holds it for so long. But we're doing all of these things instead of fixing the root problem. We're just really sedating the symptoms, and slowly, silently, the stress is carving away at your sharpness.
And unfortunately, Kristin, usually people don't do anything about it until something big happens.
Right.
In my book, The Dirty Side of Leadership, same as the podcast, I tell a story about me progressively going down in 2016. And I wasn't sleeping. It's when my daughter had the bad car accident. All of this stuff happened. I won't go into it, but it began to affect my decision-making ability. I become depressed. I did not have any energy. Doing small things turned into big things. I remember going to work, and I worked out with another guy that worked for the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. We were workout partners. On the days we would run, it was 4.2 miles, and you know how hot it gets in Charleston.
Oh, yeah.
I remember sitting there looking at the clock, knowing at 11:30 I was going to have to go over, I wore a suit, change clothes, and go run this 4.2 miles. And he and I talked about that recently, because I asked him, I said, did I act differently? And he said, yeah, you would go silent. And one day I had to get security to give me a ride back to the base because I was burning up. But I literally crashed, and I had to try to find a way to take some time off. And I've admitted this. I got medicated for a brief period to get some sleep. And I'm so glad I did, by the way.
Yeah.
I never knock someone for that.
Yes. And I've shared I had to do that around the time of my daughter's brain surgeries, right? So like
Hmm.
we all have things, and I got physical symptoms. Like my whole body was like very angry at me for the stress it was under. And so, your stomach is your second brain, right? So the symptoms can be wide ranging depending on how you're wired. But yeah, I'm the same way, Ron. I'm never going to look down on somebody for doing something they need to do to get better. And, for an analogy, think of your brain like a high performance engine. You can't just keep redlining it and assume it's going to keep running smoothly. I blew a head gasket when I was 16 because I had my boyfriend's picture up on the dash and it was covering the gauge and I couldn't see that it was red. So yeah, you eventually can blow a head gasket or you can blow an engine if you just keep redlining it and assume everything's good and everything's good to go. Eventually something's gonna snap and that oil gets sludgy.
Yeah, and Kristen, before we move down to this tactical prevention, I just wanted to say, as you said, there's always collateral damage. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter what your occupation is. It doesn't matter with family, with job decisions, even managing your finances. There's always going to be collateral damage. So once again, it's time to get control of this diminishing brain health and take
Right.
it way more seriously than we have in the past because we know so much more. We understand so much more, especially with AI. So I hope this
Yeah.
episode is resonating with us. Kristen, start us off on some tactical preventions. What's things we can do to
Yeah.
kind of prevent this?
So the Mind diet, leafy greens, so MIND, right? So leafy greens, berries, olive oil, fish, whole grains. That's going to reduce Alzheimer's risk by over 50%, according to many studies that we were looking over. Sugar and seed oils. Seed oils are inflammatory, and processed foods. That is brain poison.
And Kristen, I'm really proud of the shake that I do. I do some unhealthy things, but most days, unless I'm going to a coffee shop, I do this health shake and I put a lot of ingredients. I'm going to do a post on that in the near
Yeah.
future. But I do think it has helped me immensely in a lot of different ways. So one of
Mm-hmm.
the biggest things for me is exercise. We
Mm-hmm.
call it brain fertilizer. And it doesn't have to be a big event. I'd start people off coaching, getting them to start off one day, and we do habit stacking where you start when you wake up, after your meditation or whatever you do 10, 15 push-ups, then you brush your teeth,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe you do 10 more. Or I get them to do 30 seconds of cold water for a shower because you're telling your brain
Oh
we're
yeah.
accomplishing things, we're getting healthy, we're releasing endorphins and serotonin and the things we need to relax. So exercise for me is a game changer. If I
Oh yeah.
go 3 days without exercising, it affects my sleep, it affects my diet, everything about it. Now we've talked enough about reducing the size of the hippocampus, but think how serious that is. Your brain is
Mm-hmm.
shrinking under the stress of that. So resistance training improves insulin sensitivity, which
Yeah.
is also directly tied to brain function.
Yeah, it is. And, I just started on a health journey. I started working out, I've done 7 days in a row. And it was funny, after 2 days, I'm like, I got the bug again, like in a good way. Like I wanted to go to the gym
Right.
every single day. And it is because of the science behind it. I was feeling good. I achieved, right. And then just your brain kicks into gear. And it's just a positive all around. But that also, you can dive deeper into it, but that also helps with prevention of memory loss, Alzheimer's, and dementia. And, we've talked a lot about sleep. Sleep is critical. During deep sleep, your brain clears out all of the dust and the cobwebs. I think it's really important. A lot of people don't realize that is that it's like a hard boot, like you're rebooting your computer. Your brain needs that every night. And so if you're not getting that, you're not going to function properly.
No, it's very true. And I encourage people because we could go through some of the chemicals and vitamins and things from vitamin D to, fasting insulin, those kind of things. But you should
Mm-hmm.
Google that or talk to your doctor about your blood work and be
Mm-hmm.
specific. I have found that sometimes you have to ask doctor's question. You have to prod them a little bit to see
yeah.
what's best for me. But some of the basic things, the biggest one that you mentioned, Kristin, is sleep. And it's been a struggle for me. And I've tons of people, even in my coaching, people seem to sleep less now than ever before. And I have to give a shout out to Mark Ryan. He actually was the IT specialist at the academy, but he was a fitness guru. And he made a statement to me that it's really changed me. I asked him, because he stayed here with me because he was editing my 8-hour leadership program. So he would go to bed at 8:30, which loathes me. I can't stand to think about going to bed at 8:30.
That is early.
he would get up at 4:30. He would be at the academy by 5 and working out. And I asked him one time, I go, how do you go to sleep at 8:30? And he just said the simple words. He said, my body is worn out. So he would do CrossFit vigorous. And by 3:00, he said he's starting to get sleepy because he has that difficult workout. And what I did, Kristin, is I increased the intensity. Because when I was in organized martial arts and stuff, I worked out so hard, I thought, that's not necessary anymore.
Right.
But I'm back to increased intensity. I do a ton of stomach, legs, those kind of things, and breaking a sweat, and my sleep improves. And of course, I go a little low on that energy drink, as I've said.
Yeah, just a little, just the 90-10 on top there.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I think it's just an accumulative of everything. And, that's, talking about what you're talking about, that's what productive leadership looks like. We're not just building businesses or leading teams, but we're managing the one system that makes it all possible, which is our brain. And, whether folks listening are in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, this is your window. I'm in my 40s and I'm starting to get into that perimenopausal age range, and I'm feeling some changes. And that's one of the reasons I was like, I need to get my butt to the gym and start. Basically, I'm not going to allow myself to age. So I was like, I'm going to take it by the horns and make some positive changes. But you can do this at any age. And again, you should be thinking about this as early as in your 30s.
And Kristin, I'm going to throw in one more big one, alcohol.
Oh, yeah.
I hear people all the time saying, I don't sleep well when I drink, or I drink a glass of wine to go to sleep, but then I have to get up and pee, and all these things happen. For me, I never have to worry about being an alcoholic because alcohol and me do not get along. If I were to drink, I would be up until the early morning hours, have to hydrate like crazy. I do tell people that drink a lot of water because it's dehydrating you. But you do have to give consideration, especially the older you are. There might have been a time in your 20s that you could just party and go on to work, but it's all going to catch up with you. And you want to be healthier in the latter part of your life. So I would just say that none of the things we've said is a mystery, but hopefully you hearing them audibly will make you think about it, let it resonate, and ask yourself, am I taking care of my brain? And I don't think we ever ask those questions very often. Am I protecting my brain? Am I nurturing my brain? Am I feeding my brain? And am I resting my brain? And if you begin to think about those things, you can take the proactive and productive steps that we've talked about and be much more healthy mentally.
Right. I mean, to your point, I think about in my early 20s when we used to go out drinking often, and I could, the bars closed at 2 a.m. here. We could close the bar down and we'd be driving to Muchos Gracias, getting a gigantic bean and cheese burrito, and then I'd go right to bed and I was fine. That is not the case now. I rarely drink. If I do, I feel horrendous the next day. And so your age does play into this. So your lifestyle should generally adjust as you, I know some where it did not adjust and they're still living like they're 21, but you want to adjust it because your body is not operating the same way it once did. And those burritos, man, if I did that today, I'd have the worst acid reflux. God, Ron, I can't even imagine.
I went to Taco Tuesday. It was so good, but that's another story. Let's land the plane here. Kristin,
okay.
Let's do what I do in coaching. I tell people to do increments. I talked about habit stacking, how your brain, if you start trying to build a new habit, your brain's like, whoa, that's too hard. But if you stack onto an existing habit, it's easier. So why don't you give us, I tell people, like, don't set your goal to run a marathon, set your goal to run a mile, So
Yeah.
give us some small things we can do, and we'll close this out.
Yes. Okay. So, and I just heard RFK talking about this and it really resonated with me. He was like, I don't eat anything with more than 3 ingredients. And I was like, oh, I
Oh,
thought I ate pretty clean, but I was looking at the ingredient list on something the other day and it had like 5, 6. I'm like, yeah, that's a good rule of thumb. But that's on the extreme end. So let's just say for those who are entering the health journey, or at least, not that deep into it, you want to swap one processed food for whole food. And whole food, again, the ingredients, 1 to 3 ingredients is what you want to aim for. Could be a sweet potato, right? Nature's candy. Sleep 30 minutes earlier. So, Ron, if you're going to bed at midnight, aim for 11:30.
no,
You're like, that's early.
no, I'm doing that.
You are doing that. Okay, good.
Yeah,
Now
my reading has helped too. I switched. I
okay.
said from books are hard for me to navigate in bed and when I'm sitting up and all
Yeah.
that. So now that I've dimmed my phone and I've got it set up, I just literally cut the phone off and go to sleep. Like,
Good for you. I'm there with you. I definitely didn't think I'd be going to bed at 10:30 at night because I was the night owl and I couldn't turn off before midnight. But I've definitely made some changes, and now, like you, turn the phone off, go to bed, and it works. But aim for 30 minutes earlier. Walk 20 minutes 3 times this week. You can do it after meals. That helps with digestion if you're having digestive issues. Even if you're not, it's a good thing. We're one of the only countries, people in Asia, India, you'll see I have people from those areas in my neighborhood, and you will see they walk as a family after meals. They are
wow.
digesting. Yes. And I'm like, that is cool. There's something to it. And gosh, I think it's important that we talked about those labs earlier. I like what you said. I tell my doctor, so I go on. And I have group health, so you do have to pretty much do your own advocacy. So I look up what I want. I want a metabolic panel for someone who's in perimenopause. And I just did this the other day. I sent my doctor, I want you to order these labs for me. And it was exactly what I wanted. And she'll do it. It
Exactly.
doesn't put in any work into it.
Yeah.
So you guys can do that for yourselves.
They do listen more than you think if you will take the initiative and discuss it. But it is historically accurate. Men do not schedule their health exams. They do not
Right.
go to the doctor nearly as much as women. And men, you got to do it.
Yeah.
People having heart attacks are like, my left arm's numb.
Yeah.
I must have hit something, and they're in the middle of a heart attack. So, men, if you're listening, schedule your doctor's appointments. Be proactive.
Yeah.
Get your blood work done,
Mhm.
and things will go a lot better for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And for women, burnout is not a badge of honor. It's a warning sign. Rest is strategy. You talk about how your youngest, Ron, how she is, I don't know if she wants her name out there, sorry, but how she will go and do a self-care day, right? Like she'll go ahead and book a massage, do things like that when feeling stressed. And I think that is incredible. That is a sign of leadership right there.
Kristin, she's also regimented. She comes in, now they moved her time to go in at 10, so she works out in the morning. But she
Okay.
eats healthy, she eats clean, she works out. And that's something that Gen Z has brought a rebirth to. They're more likely to grow vegetables outside. There's some
Yeah.
positives from the Gen Z, but she is totally structured. And my oldest daughter, as you know, just had a infant, and I've been encouraging her because
Yes.
she and I actually work out together. Sometimes we run together. So I told her we'll be back to those 2-mile runs in no time.
Yeah. Yeah. She's in great shape too.
And by the way, getting a workout partner is instrumental. If you've got someone that you can partner with, if you need that, or a group workout. I will say this, I work out pretty hard, but if you put me in a group of CrossFitters or something, I will go harder, probably out of pride than anything else, but I will go harder than I would just by myself. So
yeah, there's something to it. I think this has been great because it's all, you get a little something. There's something for everyone. There's, you just talked about the men aspect of it too, that they don't book their own doctor's appointments, generally speaking. Married men, I don't know if this is still accurate, but live longer, probably because their wife makes their doctor's appointment. So there's something to just being on top of all of that. And it feels good. It's that achievement aspect to it too. So
Absolutely.
It's a win-win.
Remember this, everyone. Great leadership begins with a healthy, resilient mind. Mental fitness is what we call our coaching program. All right, everyone. Be the leader you're meant to be.
We'll see you next week.
The Dirty Side of Leadership podcast is brought to you by Forward Operations. If you'd like to book Ron or Kristin for speaking events, training, or executive coaching, visit forwardoperations.com. Be the leader you're meant to be.